Here we have the ever popular snake plant. This is probably one of the most versatile plants that you can have inside your homes because it tolerates such a wide range of conditions. All right, so let's talk about those really quick. These are going to be the growing instructions for the snake plant. Sansevieria, mother-in-law tongue, whatever you want to call them. They are fantastic plants. It's one of my go-tos for decorating. So let's get into the care instructions. So these are going to grow best in bright light, okay? And they will actually bloom for you if you give them bright enough light. They're not a super significant bloom, but it is fun to see them anyway. It's nice to know that they're really happy. They will grow also in medium light and low light. They're probably the most low light tolerant plant that you can get for your home, okay? So if you have a place, one of those little awkward places that needs a plant that doesn't get a lot of light, this is definitely the one that is going to do the best for you, okay? So bright light, medium light, or low light for these snake plants. Next, let's talk about watering, okay? So where they grow natively, they have dry seasons and wet seasons, okay? So during the dry season is from about, it's fall through winter time, okay? So during that time, you hardly have to water these plants at all, if at all. We have about 20 snake plants in our home, and I don't really water them during the winter time at all, partly for convenience, but also because they don't really need it. If you do want to water them, if you feel like you need to water them, that's perfectly fine. I get it. Just let them dry out about 75 or even 100% in between waterings during the dry season, so fall through winter time. Now this is in the northern hemisphere again. During the spring and the summertime, they can take on much more water. They are still very drought tolerant. You can still let them dry out 100% in between watering. But if you want to maximize growth, you're going to want to water them when they're dry about 25 to 50% in between waterings. So how I measure that is I stick my, if I gauge this as 25%, I stick my finger in down to that level. If it comes out dry, then I give it a really thorough soak. Another way you can check the soil to see how wet it is by using like a chopstick or a popsicle stick, something that you can probe the soil with. Okay, so we've covered light and we've covered watering. The next thing I want to talk about is fertilizing. Okay, so these will benefit from regular fertilizing through the summer and the springtime, okay? They're not super fast growers, but they still do need nutrients. So I always use a slow release granule fertilizer, but they will also benefit from a liquid soluble fertilizer as well, just something really well balanced and used as directed on the packaging. Next, we'll cover propagation. Now you can propagate these by leaf cuttings, okay? So you can take leaf cuttings. I usually take about 2 inches at a time. So if I were to cut this leaf off at the base, I could cut this into 2 or 3 different plant sections. You can either put them back in soil or you can put them in water and they will root. They are fairly slow to root and they seem to do better with a lot more heat than something like propagating a pothos or some other vining plant. So make sure that you are putting them in a window or maybe on top of the counter where your dishwasher is. This will help create a nice warm environment for the plant to propagate in. Another great thing to do is making sure you change out the water about at least every week or so, okay? So that's going to be propagating. You can also just separate them. Under the soil here, you can see there are plenty of different plants in here. I mean, this is a whole new plant. This is a whole different plant. So really, there's probably 3 or 4 snake plants in this pot. But what you can do under the soil here, there's, between these 2 plants, there's a root that's kind of U-shaped, and it's kind of like the thickness of your knuckle usually, so it'd sit under the soil kind of like that. And so once you take this out of the pot and you dig around in the soil a little bit, you'll find that root. You can just cut them apart, tear the roots apart. Don't be worried about being a little bit rough with these guys. They can handle a lot of abuse. And then you can just plant it up in new soil. Speaking of new soil, what I use for these characters, like I said, they are fairly drought tolerant and they do want a very sharp draining mixture. So what I do is I use 3 parts cactus soil or any sort of medium that is going to drain really quickly. That could be orchid bark or pumice stone or sand. I typically just use cactus soil because I oftentimes have it on hand. Perlite even would also work. And then I use just 1 part, something that's going to be moisture retentive. So a container mix, peat moss. I usually just use container mix, so that always works for me. But anyway, so that's the ratio, 3 to 1 of something really sharp draining and something moisture retentive, because they do want to they do want to drain very quickly, very sharply, but they do want to hold on to a little bit of moisture so they can stay nice and plump and firm with their foliage. Let's see. I think that's going to do it for the care instructions for the ever popular snake plant. Oh, I do want to highlight one thing on here. There is a common problem with these guys, and they can get a little bit of disease. It's very common. It's usually nothing to do with the plant caretaker itself, but it just happens sort of randomly. This is something that can stay dormant for many, many years. It might be hard to show on camera, but can you see the discoloration right here? There's a brown spot at the base of this stem. There, you can see it a little bit better that way, just right here. So typically what I would do, if this was further up the leaf, I would just cut an inch or so below, and that will make sure that the disease doesn't spread, because the last thing you want to do is to have this spread to other leaves. But because this is towards the base, I'm just going to take the entire thing out. More often than not, there's nothing wrong with the plant. It's just a little fungal disease that can lay dormant for, like I said, years and years and years, and it just rears its ugly head every once in a while, so just cut those off. Something that can help you to not get that, something that helps with that, is making sure you don't get any water in the crown, okay? So when you do water, just make sure you're getting it in the soil, and there's no standing water in the crown. If you do get water in the crown, you know, hold it upside down, let it drain out, maybe take a paper towel or a rag or something and kind of blot out the water from in there to make sure that it doesn't accumulate and create a little bit of rot. But that's going to do it for the care instructions for the snake plant, the sansevieria, the mother-in-law's tongue. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Or of course, you can always message me on Tanner the Planter on Facebook or Instagram.